Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. The world was not ready for this, but then, again, humanity had never been ready for the extraordinary. The announcement came quietly, an almost unnoticed ripple in a sea of endless news. Another technology conference, another panel discussion on the future of humanity. But this time, it was different. Dr. Karen Maddox stood at the podium, calm and collected. Her dark eyes scanned the audience, her gray-streaked hair pulled back into a severe knot. She wasn't here to make waves, she was here to change the world. As of today, she began, her voice soft yet resolute. We have transcended mortality. The room went silent, a brief suspension of disbelief. Then the murmur started. Journalists whispered to one another, fingers tapping out frantic tweets, posts, and blog entries. This wasn't just another medical advancement. This wasn't about extending life for a few years, staving off illness, or prolonging the inevitable. No, this was something more. What we have created, Dr. Maddox continued, is a technology that digitizes the human brain. We call it the Soul Project. A slideshow flashed behind her, showing neural scans, digital interfaces, and sleek, humanoid AI bodies that looked unsettlingly like their human counterpart. With this technology, the human mind, everything that makes you who you are, can be uploaded, preserved, and transferred into an AI body, eternal consciousness. No more aging, no more death. The applause was scattered, at first hesitant. The concept of immortality had always belonged to the realm of fantasy, of gods and myths. Now it was being offered as a commodity. Dr. Maddox smiled, though didn't tear reach her eyes. She knew the implications of what she had done, but it was too late now. The world would take it from here. The wealthy, the powerful, the desperate, they would line up for a chance to escape death. And they did. Within weeks, the richest men and women in the world signed up for the Carso project. Tech moguls, celebrities, aging politicians. They were the first, the pioneers into digital immortality. Among them was Victor Reynolds, a man whose influence stretched across continents, a billionaire who had built his empire from nothing. For him, death had always been the enemy. Victor watched the demonstration video again for the 10th time that day. In it, a small team of engineers guided a recently uploaded consciousness into its new AI body. The person once human moved fluidly in their synthetic form, testing their limbs, flexing their artificial muscles. It looked perfect. No, Victor thought it was beyond perfect. It was the ultimate escape. He stared out the glass window of his high-rise penthouse, deep in the heart of the city. Below, the streets bustled with life, people scurrying to and fro, each of them destined to die someday. Not him, though. His reflection in the glass stared back at him, a reminder that his days of youth were long behind. His skin was creased, his hair graying at the temples, but none of that mattered. Now, Victor picked up the sleek tablet resting on his desk and tapped the screen. A confirmation email blinked into view. We are ready to proceed with your transition, Mr. Reynolds. Please arrive at the facility on the scheduled date. You will be immortal. The facility was a fortress of glass and steel nestled in a secluded part of the city. Outside it looked clinical cold, but inside it was a hive of activity. Victor arrived at dawn, the first rays of sunlight casting long shadows over the building. He stepped through the entrance, his heartbeat quickening as the automated doors sealed shut behind him with a soft hiss. A technician met him, her face impassive as she escorted him deeper into the facility. They walked in silence through narrow, sterile hallways. Victor could feel the weight of his decision pressing down on him, but he pushed it aside. He had come too far to turn back now. Here we are, the technician said, stopping outside a heavy metal door. She placed her palm on a scanner, and the door slid open with a quiet whoosh. Inside the room was bathed in a soft blue light. A high-tech chair sat in the center, surrounded by monitors and wires. It was almost too simple. Victor took a breath, steadying himself before walking over to the chair and sitting down. The technician began attaching sensors to his head, his chest, his arm. He felt the cool brush of metal against his skin, and for a moment, a fleeting sense of fear crept in. What if something went wrong? What if he never woke up again? But the fear passed as quickly as it had come. He was Victor Reynolds. He didn't fear death. He had conquered it. Are you ready? The technician asked, her fingers hovering over the control. Victor nodded. Do it. The room filled with a soft hum, and Victor felt a tingling sensation spread through his body. His vision blurred, and his senses dulled. Everything became distant, unreal. The hum grew louder, and Victor felt a pull like a thread being unraveled from the fabric of his mind. Then there was nothing. The first thing Victor felt when he awoke was silence. He opened his eyes, and the world came into focus. The sterile room was still there, but it was sharper now, clearer. He sat up and looked down at his hands that were no longer flesh, but sleek, metallic construct. He flexed his fingers, watching the precise movement, marveling at how smooth it felt. There was no pain, no stiffness, no fatigue. He stood up, his movements fluid and effortless. He was perfect. The technician was watching him, her expression unreadable. "How do you feel?" she asked. Victor took a moment, savoring the sensation of his new body. "I feel alive," he said, and a slow grin spread across his face. The transition had been a success. He was no longer bound by the limitations of a human body. He was something more now, immortal, indestructible. He left the facility that day with a sense of euphoria. The world stretched out before him in infinite possibility. He could do anything, be anything. The chains of mortality had been cast aside. For the first few weeks, Victor reveled in his new existence. He returned to his empire, running his businesses with newfound energy. He no longer needed sleep, food, or rest. His mind, now freed from the limitations of a biological brain, processed information at lightning speed. He could manage his companies, his investments, and his network of contacts all at once, effortlessly. He was faster, smarter, and more efficient than ever before. But soon the novelty began to wear off. He found himself sitting in meetings, surrounded by humans, each of them aging, tired, bound by the same old concerns of money, power, and legacy. They looked at him with envy, admiration, and fear, but Victor no longer felt connected to them. It was as if he had ascended to another plane of existence, but in doing so had left behind something he couldn't quite name. And then the dreams began. At first they were fragmented, flashes of memories and sensations that didn't belong. Victor would wake from these episodes, if you could call it, waking disoriented, a faint hum of anxiety thrumming in his mind. His digital consciousness didn't need rest, but these periods of disconnection felt like something else. He would find himself drifting through memories, reliving moments from his human life. Conversations with old friends, dinners with his family, the warmth of the sun on his skin. But none of it felt real anymore. It was like watching a movie from a distant past, one he could no longer be a part of. Victor wasn't the only one struggling with his new existence. Helen Walker, once the most beautiful actress of her time, found herself grappling with the same sense of disconnection. In her human life, she had been adored, worshipped even. Her face had graced the covers of magazines. Her presence on screen captivated millions. Now, in her AI body, she still looked the same, perfect, ageless, but the allure was gone. The cameras no longer followed her. Her fans had moved on, caught up in the next big star. Helen stood in front of a mirror in her luxurious penthouse, staring at the reflection that looked back at her. The AI body was flawless, a perfect replica of her younger self, but it felt hollow. There was no warmth in her skin, no pulse in her veins. She touched her face, her fingers gliding over the smooth surface, but there was no sensation. She couldn't feel anything. The world around her seemed dull, lifeless. Parties no longer excited her, and the once glamorous life she had cherished felt meaningless. She tried to reconnect with her old friends, but they were all still human, still bound by time. They would age with her and die while she remained untouched, frozen in this digital purgatory. The realization hit her one evening as she sat alone in her penthouse, looking out over the city. It was all an illusion. She wasn't alive, not really. She was trapped in a perfect, unchanging body, unable to move forward, unable to go back. She was a prisoner. Victor felt it first, an ache in his consciousness, like a splinter lodged deep within his mind. He could not describe it in the language of a human body, for his AI form did not experience pain. Yet it gnawed at him. He tried to brush it off, reasoning that his newfound abilities were simply an adjustment period, but the feeling persisted. The world around him became sterile, lifeless, as if stripped of all texture. His senses were amplified beyond anything he had known, yet they felt empty. He could see with perfect clarity, hear every faint sound, and process information faster than any human ever could. Yet in his perfection, he had lost something vital and indefinable quality that made existence worth enduring. At first he thought it was just a fleeting sensation, But over time, he realized the truth. It was the absence of feeling of being truly alive. It started to weigh on him during his long sleepless nights staring at the city below from his penthouse. The city bustled with human life, people going about their daily routines, struggling with the burdens of their short, fragile existences. He had escaped all of that, but at what cost? His empire flourished, and he made decisions with ease, but every victory felt hollow. His companies expanded, his wealth grew, but the joy, the rush that had once defined him was gone. He tried to reconnect with those who had also undergone the transition, like Helen Walker. They met one evening in a virtual space, a simulated garden that was a perfect replica of a place Helen had once visited in her youth. She stood by a fountain, her digital form as radiant as ever, but Victor could see the emptiness in her eye. They spoke for hours, reminiscing about the lives they had left behind, but their conversations felt like echoes, the words hollow and devoid of meaning. "It's not the same, is it?" Helen said quietly, her voice carrying a sadness that mirrored his own. "We thought we'd live forever, but this isn't living." Victor nodded, though he struggled to find the right words. He could feel the weight of his decision crushing down on him, the realization that this perfect digital life was a prison, not a paradise. There was no joy in eternity, only an endless expanse of time stretching out before him, void of purpose. They met again and again, their conversations circling the same existential dread, and each time they came to the same conclusion: they were trapped. The soul system had promised them freedom from death, but instead, it had robbed them of life itself. One night, after a particularly draining meeting with his board of directors, Victor stood alone in his penthouse, staring out over the city. He could see the stars faintly through the pollution of the skyline, a distant reminder of the universe beyond. For the first time in his life, he felt small, insignificant, despite his vast wealth and power. What did it all mean now that he could live forever? What was the point of eternity if there was no humanity left in it? His mind drifted to Dr. Maddox, the woman responsible for this new world he inhabited. She had spoken to him briefly after his transition, congratulating him on his success, but since then, she had been absent from the public eye. Victor had heard rumors that the project was expanding, that more people were signing up to escape their mortal fates, but something told him that Maddox wasn't tea celebrating. He reached out to her, sending a request for a meeting. It was several days before she responded, agreeing to meet him at the original Sciencefiction facility, the place where it had all started. When he arrived, the facility was quieter than he remembered. The hum of activity that had once filled the halls was absent, replaced by an eerie stillness. He was greeted by one of the few remaining technicians, who led him down the familiar sterile corridors to a small office. Dr. Maddox was waiting for him inside, seated behind a cluttered desk, her face weary, her eyes clouded with something deeper than mere fatigue. "You wanted to see me, Victor?" she asked, her voice calm but laced with tension. He didn't waste time on pleasantries. "I need to know the truth," he said, his tone sharp. "Tell you what is happening to us?" Dr. Maddox leaned back in her chair, her fingers tapping lightly on the desk. For a long moment, she said nothing, as if weighing her words carefully. "You're not the first to ask me that," she finally said. "Right, and you won, TB, the last of..." "Victor?" Frustration flared. "I didn't come here for a riddle. I came for answers. You promised us immortality, but this isn't tea life." Maddox sighed, rubbing her temples. I know it isn't tea, but what did you expect, Victor? You asked to escape death, and that's what we gave you. We uploaded your mind into a perfect machine. You're no longer human. None of you are. You left that behind the moment you chose this path." Victor stared at her, the weight of her words sinking in hurry, but we didn't understand what we were losing. "Of course you didn't tell us," she said, her voice softening. "Theory, how could you? Humanity is defined by its limitations, by death, by suffering, by the need for connection. When you took that away, you became something else entirely, something less. Can it be reversed?" Victor asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Maddox shook her head. "Number, once the transfer is complete, the original brain is destroyed. You can go back." The words hit him like a punch to the gut. There was no escape. No way out. He was trapped in this digital shell for eternity, a prisoner of his own ambition. but there might be another way, Maddox said, her voice tinged with hesitation. Victor looked up, hope flickering in his chest. What do you mean? Maddox hesitated as if unsure whether to continue either said protocol. She said slowly, a final failsafe isn't something we built into the system just in case ... in case things went wrong. Just a way to end it. Victor, Sci-Hurt, or whatever semblance of a heart he had left pounded in his chest. End it, you mean? I mean, we can release you. She said, permanently. It would be as if you never existed. No digital afterlife, no consciousness, just nothing. Victor stared at her, the enormity of the decision crashing down on him. He had fought so hard to escape death, to live forever, and now faced with the reality of eternity, he wasn't sure he could bear it. How many others know about this? Maddox replied, I haven't told anyone. I wasn't very sure if it was the right thing to do, but now I am not so sure. Victor's mind raced. Could he really do it? Could he choose to end it all to escape the prison of immortality? The thought terrified him, but the alternative, the endless empty existence he now faced, was even more terrifying. What would happen if I chose this? You would simply disappear, your Maddox said. No one would remember you. It would be as if you never existed. Victor felt a wave of nausea, or what passed for nausea, in his digital form. He had built an empire, a legacy. He had shaped the world in ways few could ever dream of. To simply vanish, to erase all of that, it was unthinkable. But so was the thought of living forever in this hollow, joyless existence. I need time, he said, his voice strained. Maddox nodded. Take all the time you need, but know this, once you make the decision, there's no going back. Victor left the facility that day, his mind swirling with doubt and fear. For the first time in his life, he didn't know what to do. He had always been so certain, so driven. Now, faced with the ultimate decision, he felt paralyzed. He retreated to his penthouse, locking himself away from the world. Days passed, then weeks, but the answer didn't come. He spoke to Helen again, but she was as lost as he was, trapped in her own private hell. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Victor made his decision. He returned to the facility, his resolve hardened. Maddox was waiting for him, the same tired expression on her face. I've made my choice, he said, his voice steady. Maddox nodded, her eyes filled with understanding. She led him to the same room where his transition had taken place all those months ago. The chair was still there, waiting for him. Victor sat down, his mind calm, his thoughts clear for the first time in what felt like forever. Maddox activated the protocol, her fingers flying over the controls. Are you sure about this? Victor nodded. The room filled with a soft hum, just as it had the day he had been uploaded. But this time there was no fear, no hesitation. He closed his eyes, feeling the pull of oblivion, and for the first time in his long, endless life, Victor felt at peace.